It is past midnight. The olive trees press close on every side, their roots twisting out of the dark hillside like hands reaching for something they cannot hold. Torches push yellow light through the branches. There are soldiers, Roman soldiers and temple guards together, an unlikely alliance, moving in formation down the slope into the garden. Leading them is a man named Judas. And behind Judas, in the darkness, is a man named Malchus. Malchus is the servant of the high priest. He is not a soldier. He is not a leader. He is a man who was sent with the crowd. He is there because his master told him to be there. He is there, in the Garden of Gethsemane, on the night Jesus of Nazareth is arrested, and in a few moments, the Apostle Peter will pull a sword from under his cloak and take off Malchus's right ear. And Jesus will pick up that ear and put it back. That is the miracle nobody counts. Performed not in a synagogue. Not in front of a crowd of thousands. Not to validate his ministry or prove his identity. Performed in darkness, in chaos, in the worst moment of his own life on a man who had come to help arrest him. We will get to that miracle. But not yet. Because to understand why that moment matters, you need to understand what came before it. Every healing. Every storm silenced. Every dead person called back to life. Because the miracles of Jesus are not a random list of supernatural events scattered across 4 Gospels. They are a pattern. A deliberate, escalating sequence, moving from the deeply personal to the cosmically impossible, that ends not where most people think it ends, but in that dark garden, with one act that redefines everything he had been doing for 3 years. This is not a list. This is not a catalog of Bible trivia. This is not a textbook for Sunday school teachers who want to count to 37 and move on. This is a map of how God moves when He walks among us. And when you see where the map ends, it will change how you read everything that comes before it. The Greek word for miracle in 3 of the 4 Gospels is dunamis. Power. It is the same root the English language borrowed when it created the word dynamite. Luke uses it as a physical thing, a force that moves through Jesus like current. When the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years touched the fringe of his cloak in a pressing crowd, Luke records that Jesus immediately felt dunamis leave his body. He turned around in the crowd and asked who touched him. His disciples thought he was joking. There were 50 people touching him. But he had felt it go out, a specific, directed release of power in response to one specific person's faith. Pay attention to that. Because it tells you something important about how these miracles work. They are not performances. They are not demonstrations scheduled by a divine calendar. Many of them are responses drawn out of him by the faith of someone desperate enough to reach. The Gospel of John uses a different word entirely. John never calls what Jesus does a miracle. He calls each one a Sēmeion. A sign. And a sign, by definition, does not point to itself. It points to something else. A sign on a highway does not say, "Look at this sign." It says, "Look at what this sign is telling you about what is ahead." Every healing. Every storm silenced. Every loaf of bread that multiplied in a fisherman's hands. In John's framework, none of them are the point. They are all arrows pointing at something, someone, beyond themselves. Now watch what happens when you read the miracles in sequence. There is a woman in Galilee. The text does not give us her name. What it gives us instead is a number. 12. She has been bleeding for 12 years, a hemorrhage that never stopped, that the law of Moses made ritually unclean, that cut her off from temple worship, from touching another person, from any physical community for 12 years. She has spent everything she had on doctors. Every last coin. The text says she only grew worse. You can imagine what 12 years of that does to a person. Not just the physical pain. The isolation. The silence. The watching other women walk into the synagogue while you stand outside. The growing certainty that God has either forgotten you or is deliberately withholding something from you. And on a specific afternoon in Capernaum, she hears that Jesus of Nazareth is passing through, surrounded by a crowd. She cannot announce herself. She cannot push through and ask. She is unclean. Anyone she touches becomes unclean. So she moves through the crowd from behind, not pushing, moving, and she reaches out one hand and touches not Jesus himself, but the fringe of his outer garment. And immediately, the bleeding stops. Not gradually. Not in 3 days when she checks and hopes. Immediately. She feels it in her body. And then Jesus stops. Turns. Asks the question his disciples find bewildering. Who touched me? Not because he does not know. Because he wants her to come forward. Because he wants to look her in the face. Because the healing of her body is only half of what she needs. She needs to be seen. She comes forward trembling. Falls at his feet. Tells him the whole truth. And he calls her something he calls almost no one else in the Gospels. He calls her daughter. That is where the pattern begins. Not with the dramatic. Not with the public. With a woman in a crowd who had run out of options. Here is what most people miss. That same afternoon, a man named Jairus is waiting for Jesus to finish. Jairus is a synagogue ruler, a figure of authority, a man of standing, everything this woman is not. And Jairus had fallen at Jesus' feet in public, in front of the crowd, to beg for his daughter. His daughter, who is 12 years old. The same number. 12 years of suffering. 12 years of life. Luke places these two stories inside each other deliberately. Because the pattern is already there in the first act. The woman who was ceremonially dead to her community, restored. And the girl who is literally about to die, about to be restored. We will come back to Jairus' daughter. First, a road outside Jericho. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. He is sitting by the roadside when he hears that the crowd moving toward him contains Jesus of Nazareth. And he does something that infuriates the people around him. He shouts, "Son of David," the messianic title, the title no one is supposed to say in public, "Have mercy on me." The crowd tells him to be quiet. He shouts louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stops. And in one of the strangest, most human moments in the Gospels, he asks a man who is obviously blind what he wants. "What do you want me to do for you?" Not because he doesn't know. Because he wants to hear Bartimaeus say it. Because the asking is part of the receiving. "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." And he does. But stay with me. Because the third miracle in this early sequence is the one that should stop you cold. A Roman centurion walks toward Jesus in Capernaum. A centurion commanded 100 soldiers. He was an instrument of the empire that occupied Judea, that collected taxes from Jewish families, that crucified people for insurrection. He had no reason to approach a Jewish rabbi. Every social and political barrier said this was not done. He comes anyway. His servant is paralyzed at home, suffering terribly. And before Jesus can even respond, before he can offer to come, the centurion stops him. He says, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. Because I, too, am a man under authority. I give orders and they are followed. Say the word." That is enough. Jesus stops. Turns to the crowd following him. And says something he says about almost no one, "I have not found faith like this. Not in Israel. Not among the people who have heard the prophets for 1,000 years. Not in the synagogues or the temple courts." This Roman soldier, this outsider, this occupier, he understands something about authority and trust that the religious insiders have missed entirely. The servant is healed in that hour. The pattern in Act 1, woman with nowhere left to turn. Blind man with nothing to lose. Roman soldier with no business being there. 3 people with nothing in common except one thing. They believed. And that belief drew Dunamis out of him like a current finds the lowest ground. Think about that sequence for a moment. A bleeding woman, a blind beggar, an enemy soldier. Jesus is already building something, and it is not a career. It is a pattern. A pattern of reaching toward the people everyone else has already given up on. If this is your first time watching Sacred Shadows, you are in the right place. We open the stories inside the Bible that most churches touch on the surface but never go deep. Subscribe and hit the bell, because what this pattern leads to in the second half of this video will genuinely unsettle you, in the best possible way. Now the stakes begin to climb. Remember Jairus. He had come to Jesus earlier that afternoon. His daughter, 12 years old, was sick and dying. But while Jesus was speaking with the woman who touched his cloak, a messenger arrived from Jairus' house. Do not bother the teacher anymore. Your daughter is dead. Think about what it would mean to be standing there. You are a synagogue ruler, a man who has read the Torah his entire life, who knows what dead means. Dead means gone. Dead means sealed, washed, mourned. You have just watched a public healing. And now the worst news of your life arrives in a sentence. Jesus hears the messenger, turns to Jairus, and says 5 words, do not fear. Only believe. He takes 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, and walks to the house. There are mourners already. Flute players. Professional mourners who wailed and beat their chests. Jesus tells them to leave. He says, she is not dead but sleeping. They laugh at him. He goes in, takes the child's hand, and says, in Aramaic, the language of the street, not the temple, Talitha Cumi. Little girl, get up. Mark preserves the exact Aramaic phonetics because the eyewitnesses remembered the specific sound of his voice when he said it. Not a translation. The sound. She gets up. Immediately. 12 years old. Walks across the room. Jesus tells them to give her something to eat. But it gets stranger. Because the miracles are not only personal now. They are expanding outward. A hillside near the Sea of Galilee. 5,000 men, Matthew notes this, not counting women and children, so the actual number may have been 15 to 20,000 people. It is late. Isolated place. The disciples come to Jesus with the practical problem, send them away to buy food. We have nothing here but 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus takes the loaves, blesses them, breaks them, hands them to the disciples. The disciples hand them to the crowd. And they do not run out. 5,000 men, eating until satisfied. 12 baskets of fragments left over. 12. Again. That number keeps appearing. You are not imagining it. Now watch what happens that same night. The disciples cross the lake by boat. Jesus stays behind to pray. The wind comes up, a sudden storm, common on the Sea of Galilee, where temperature shifts between the surrounding hills can produce violent squalls without warning. The disciples are experienced fishermen. They row through most of the night. And then, in the 4th watch of the night. 3 in the morning. 4 in the morning. The darkest hours, when the body is most exhausted and most afraid, they see a figure walking toward them on the water. Every instinct they have says, this cannot be real. They cry out in terror. Phantom. Ghost. And Jesus says, take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. Peter, impulsive, immediate, always the one who acts before he thinks, says, Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water. Jesus says, come. And Peter gets out of the boat. He walks on water. For a few steps, he actually walks on water. And then he looks at the wind and the waves, and he sinks. Jesus catches him by the hand and pulls him up. Why did you doubt? The pattern is expanding. From a woman who needed to be healed, to a girl who needed to be raised, to a crowd who needed to be fed, to a storm that needed to be silenced. From one body, to one family, to 20,000 people, to the physical laws of the universe itself. And then comes Lazarus. Stay with me, because this one is different. Lazarus of Bethany is not a stranger. He is a friend. His sisters, Mary and Martha, send word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." Jesus waits 2 days. Deliberately. He waits until he knows Lazarus is dead. And then he walks toward Bethany, which is 2 miles from Jerusalem, 2 miles from the city where the religious authorities are already planning to kill him. The disciples try to stop him. Going back there is suicide. Jesus goes anyway. By the time he arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days. 4 days in the heat of the Middle East means decomposition is advanced. Martha comes out to meet him. She says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." There is grief in that sentence, but also something sharper. Where were you? Jesus says, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answers with theology, "Yes, in the resurrection at the last day." And Jesus says something that has never been said before or since, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live." Do you believe this? He goes to the tomb. Mary comes with him. The mourners come with her. And then the text gives us the shortest verse in the entire Bible: Jesus wept. Not because he did not know what he was about to do. He knew. He wept because grief is real and he was fully inside it. He wept because his friends were suffering. He wept because death, even temporary death, even death he was about to undo, was not the way things were supposed to be, and he felt that with everything he had. He commands them to roll away the stone. Martha protests, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor. He has been dead 4 days." And Jesus speaks into a dark hole in a hillside, "Lazarus, come out." And a dead man, wrapped in burial linens, walks out of his tomb. The crowd sees it. Some believe. Some go immediately to the Pharisees to report what happened. And the religious authorities hold a council and decide that Jesus must be killed, specifically because he is raising people from the dead, and if this continues, the whole nation will follow him. The highest stakes miracle yet, and it triggers the sequence that leads to the cross. Here is the part nobody tells you. Lazarus was not the last miracle Jesus performed before the crucifixion. There was one more. Go back to the garden. It is Thursday night. Jesus and his disciples have left the upper room and crossed the Kidron Valley to an olive grove on the slope of the Mount of Olives. The Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus goes deeper into the trees to pray, a prayer so intense that Luke describes his sweat as falling like drops of blood. The disciples fall asleep 3 times. And then the torches appear. Judas leads them and his soldiers, temple guards, the servants of the chief priests. A crowd with swords and clubs. Judas walks up to Jesus and kisses him, the prearranged signal. And the guards move forward. Peter does what Peter always does. Acts before he thinks. He reaches under his cloak and pulls out a sword, a short blade, and swings it at the nearest person to him. The nearest person is Malchus, the servant of the high priest. Peter misses the kill strike and catches his ear. The right ear. Malchus's ear is on the ground in the dark. Jesus steps forward. He says to Peter, "Put your sword away." Then he bends down or reaches forward, the text does not say exactly, and he touches the place where the ear was. And the ear is restored. Luke is the only gospel writer who records that Jesus healed it. Luke was a physician. He noticed the medical detail the others perhaps took for granted in the chaos. Now pause. Hold that moment. Jesus is about to be arrested. He knows what arrest means. He has told his disciples 3 times that he will be handed over, beaten, killed. This is the moment his 3-year ministry ends in public failure, in the eyes of everyone watching. His closest friends are about to flee. One of them already betrayed him. Another just assaulted a government official with a weapon. And in that moment, that specific, chaotic, worst possible moment, his last free act before the soldiers bind his hands is to heal the man who came to help arrest him. Not a follower. Not someone who asked. Malchus never asked for anything. He was collateral damage in a panicked disciple's swing. He was the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong garden. He was, in every practical sense, on the other side. And Jesus healed him anyway. This is not a story about power. This is not a story about proof. This is not a story about a God who performs miracles to impress people or validate his credentials. This is a story about mercy shown to a bleeding woman who had run out of options, shown to a blind man on a roadside, shown to an enemy soldier who never asked, never believed, never followed, was simply standing in the wrong place when a sword came down. And here is what John chapter 20, verse 30 says. After everything. After the resurrection, after the 40 days, after the ascension. After all of it. John writes, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. These are written so that you may believe. The record is incomplete. By design. What we have is not the full library, it is the curated selection. The signs chosen specifically to point at something. And then John adds, in the very last verse of his gospel, if every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. The 1st century Jewish historian Josephus, writing around 93 AD in his Antiquities of the Jews, refers to Jesus as a doer of wonderful works. Not a magician. Not a deceiver. A doer of wonderful works, a phrase that acknowledges, even from a non-Christian source, that something was happening that could not be easily categorized. But category was never the point. The pattern, when you lay it all out, goes like this. It begins with the unreachable, the woman who could not touch anyone, touching the hem of his cloak. It moves outward, a beggar on a road, a soldier from Rome, a synagogue ruler's daughter. It expands further, a crowd of 20,000 fed on a hillside, a storm silenced on a lake at 3 a.m, a man called out of a tomb 4 days after his burial. And it ends, not at the empty tomb, but in the garden, hours before the cross, with one act so quiet that only one of the 4 gospel writers thought to record it. Mercy to an enemy. In his worst hour. Think about what that means in purely human terms. If you are in the worst crisis of your own life, if the moment you have dreaded has arrived, if the people closest to you are failing you, if the institution you have served is turning on you, what is your instinct? Self-preservation. Anger. Retreat. Those are human instincts. They are not wrong. They are simply human. Jesus' instinct, in that same kind of moment, was to stop. To reach. To heal. The Didache, one of the earliest Christian texts outside the New Testament, written around the year 100, describes miraculous healing as the ongoing signature of authentic ministry, not as proof, but as continuation. The pattern doesn't stop with Jesus. According to Eusebius in his Historia Ecclesiastica, the early church understood every healing they witnessed as an echo of the same pattern, Dunamis, flowing out in response to need, regardless of whether the person deserving received it. Because that is the radical thing inside all of this. Deserving was never part of the equation. The woman had spent everything on doctors who couldn't help her and had nothing left to offer. Bartimaeus had nothing except a voice and the nerve to keep using it when everyone told him to stop. The Centurion was a representative of an occupying military force. Jairus' daughter was dead. Lazarus was decomposing. Malchus had come to arrest him. None of them deserved anything by the logic of transaction. All of them received. So here are the 3 things you should take with you. First, the miracles of Jesus are not a random collection of supernatural events. They are a deliberate sequence with a beginning, a middle, and an end. They escalate from the personal to the cosmic to the irreversible, and they end not with a resurrection but with an act of mercy performed on an enemy. That arc is not accidental. It is the shape of something that was designed from the beginning. Second, the record is incomplete, and that incompleteness is itself part of the message. John tells us explicitly that what we have is not everything. It is the carefully chosen portion, the sign selected to point at a specific truth. Which means every time you read one of these stories, you are reading not a comprehensive database but a curated argument. The question is, an argument for what? And the answer, when you lay all 37 recorded signs in sequence, is the same answer you find at the end of every pattern. Mercy. Not power. Not proof. Mercy. Third. And this is the one that stays with you. In the worst moment of his life, surrounded by betrayal and chaos and the certainty of what was about to happen, the last thing Jesus did with his free hands was heal someone who had come to hurt him. You can spend years studying theology. You can read every commentary ever written. You can debate every doctrine and every denomination and every canon council that ever convened. But that single act, that quiet, unrequested, almost forgotten healing of Malchus's ear in a dark garden, tells you more about who Jesus was than almost anything else in the 4 Gospels. Because what it says is this: the mercy did not stop when the situation got hard. It did not stop when the person was undeserving. It did not stop when he was the one suffering. It did not stop. Which miracle hit you hardest in this video? The woman with nothing left to lose, or Lazarus being called out of the dark, or the soldier in the garden? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this is your first time here, subscribe to Sacred Shadows and hit the bell. We go deep into the stories and the books and the patterns that most churches touch on briefly and then move past. Next time, we go underground, literally. Into the caves where a Bedouin shepherd threw a rock through a clay jar in 1947 and discovered 900 scrolls that had been hidden for 2,000 years. What those scrolls actually say, and what they mean for everything you think you know about the Bible, is something no 30-minute sermon has ever fully told you. Until then, keep questioning. Keep searching. And never stop looking for what lies beneath the surface of what you were given.